She worked in his mansion for 3 years, invisible, forgotten, until the night he came home early and heard something coming from the room he'd kept locked for 5 years. What he discovered would shatter everything he thought he knew. The marble floors of the Fifth Avenue penthouse gleamed under Elena Morales' mop at 2:47 a.m. She moved like a shadow through James Whitmore's 17-room sanctuary, her rubber-soled shoes silent against the Italian tile. This was her kingdom, but only when he slept. 3 years, 1,095 nights of invisible labor. Elena knew every corner of this place better than its owner. She knew the third floorboard in the library creaked. She knew sunlight hit the Monet in the dining room at exactly 6:32 a.m. in winter. She knew Mr. Whitmore took his coffee black, read the Wall Street Journal at the breakfast table, and never, not once, looked her in the eye when she refilled his cup during her brief morning shift. She was furniture. Useful, necessary, invisible furniture. Perfect, she whispered, checking her phone. 3 hours until her morning shift started. 3 hours to transform. Elena rolled her cleaning cart into the storage closet, peeling off the yellow rubber gloves that had cracked at the fingertips. Her real hands emerged, hands that had practiced scales until her fingers bled, hands that filled notebook after notebook with musical compositions, hands that trembled before every audition. She pulled out her battered backpack from behind the industrial vacuum cleaner. Inside, sheet music for Don't Rain on My Parade, her NYU music theory textbook with coffee stains on page 247, and a crumpled flyer for open auditions at the Minskoff Theatre. 2 weeks away, her 5th audition this year. The previous 4 had ended the same way. Thank you next. But tonight she would practice. Elena made her way to the music room, a space Mr. Whitmore never entered. She knew because she dusted the Steinway grand piano every Thursday, and the layer of dust never changed between cleanings. The piano had belonged to his late wife, Caroline. Her photograph still sat on the mantel, blonde, elegant, frozen at 32, dead for 5 years from an aneurysm that struck her during a charity gala at the Met. Elena had cleaned up the champagne glass that shattered that night. She had found it behind the bar 3 years ago, missed by the original cleaning crew, a tiny shard of Caroline Whitmore's last evening on Earth. She sat at the piano bench, the leather creaking softly. Her fingers found middle C. Then she began to sing. Her voice filled the room, not the timid voice she used to say, "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," or "Right away, Mr. Whitmore," but the voice she'd trained for 6 years at community centers and subway platforms and anywhere that would let her practice. Rich, powerful, aching with emotion, she couldn't express anywhere else in her life. She sang Barbara, then Sondheim, then a composition of her own, a piece about invisible women who cleaned up other people's dreams while their own gathered dust. The city glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 43 stories below, New York never slept. Up here, Elena Morales finally woke up. She didn't hear the private elevator chime. She didn't hear the Italian leather shoes crossing the marble foyer. She didn't hear James Whitmore stop dead in the doorway of the music room, his tie loosened, his briefcase forgotten in his hand, his mouth slightly open as he listened to his cleaning woman sing his dead wife's favorite song. Elena hit the final note, holding it until her lungs burned, then released it into the silence. When she opened her eyes, she was still alone, or so she thought. James Whitmore stood frozen in the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it hadn't since Caroline died. He'd come home early from Tokyo, a cancelled meeting, a change of plans, jet lag pulling him back across time zones. He'd expected silence, darkness, the emptiness that had become his constant companion. Instead, he'd found magic in his mausoleum. He recognized her, of course, the morning cleaning woman. He'd never asked her name, though it was probably on the agency paperwork his assistant handled. She was always there at 6 a.m., gone by 8 a.m., leaving nothing but the scent of lemon polish and the faint squeak of clean windows. He'd never really looked at her. Why would he? But now, pressed against the wall like a thief in his own home, James saw her clearly for the first time, late 20s, maybe 30. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun that had come loose during her performance, curls escaping around her face. She wore the shapeless grey uniform of the cleaning service, but the way she sat at Caroline's piano, spine straight, chin lifted, fingers confident on the keys, She looked like she belonged there more than he ever had. The song ended. She sat still for a moment, her shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. Then she checked her phone, swore softly in Spanish, and began packing up her sheet music with practiced efficiency. James stepped backward, careful, quiet. His hand found the elevator button. The doors slid open with a whisper of pneumatic pressure. He rode down to the 42nd floor, the empty apartment he kept for guests who never came, and sat on a dust-covered sofa in the dark. His hands were shaking. Caroline had loved music. She'd played that piano every evening before dinner, filling their home with Chopin and Debussy, and songs from musicals she'd loved as a girl. After she died, James had locked the music room door for 2 years. When he finally opened it, the silence inside had been worse than the music's absence. He'd never played it himself, couldn't bear to, but this woman, this invisible woman who cleaned his home, she'd brought the piano back to life. James pulled out his phone and typed a text to his assistant. "Marjorie, I need information on the night cleaning staff, specifically the woman who works the 2 a.m. shift, everything, education, background, interests, tomorrow morning." He paused, then added, "discreetly." He deleted the message. Then he typed it again and hit send before he could change his mind. Through the floor, he heard the faint rumble of the vacuum cleaner starting up. Elena Morales, he would learn her name tomorrow, was erasing all evidence of her secret life, transforming back into the invisible ghost who would serve him coffee in 4 hours and accept his indifference with a quiet, "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." But James Whitmore couldn't unsee what he'd seen, and he had no idea what to do about it. The city lights blurred through the windows as he sat in the darkness, listening to the sound of cleaning on the floor above, and feeling something he hadn't felt in 5 years: curiosity, wonder, and the beginning of something dangerous that felt almost like hope. Eleanor arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, as always. Her uniform was pressed, her hair twisted into the same neat bun, her face carefully blank. The night shift Elena, the one who sang and dreamed, had been packed away with her sheet music. She let herself in through the service entrance, bypassed the gleaming kitchen, and headed straight for Mr. Whitmore's study to begin her morning rounds. He was already there. This had never happened before. James Whitmore sat at his mahogany desk, still wearing yesterday's suit, his silver hair slightly mussed. Papers lay scattered across the leather surface, architectural plans, contracts, photographs of buildings she didn't recognize. A cold cup of coffee sat at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and for one heart-stopping moment their eyes met. Elena froze. Had he heard her, seen her? Was this the moment she lost everything? "Coffee," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Please." "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." She retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking as she started the espresso machine, a $14,000 Italian contraption that intimidated her every single morning. The beans were from a small roaster in Brooklyn that charged $40 per pound. She'd looked it up once, just to know what luxury tasted like in numerical terms. While the machine hissed and gurgled, Elena steadied her breathing. He didn't know. He couldn't know. He'd looked at her the same way he always did, like she was part of the furniture, necessary but unremarkable. She arranged the coffee on the silver tray Caroline Whitmore had picked out at Tiffany's. Elena knew because she'd found the receipt once, tucked inside the drawer. $800 for a tray, more than Elena's weekly salary. When she returned to the study, Mr. Whitmore was staring out the window at the awakening city. The sun was rising over the East River, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Leave it on the desk," he said without turning around. Eleanor set down the tray and turned to go. "Wait." She stopped, her heart in her throat. James Whitmore turned from the window. He looked tired, more than tired, hollowed out. For the first time in 3 years, Elena saw him as something other than her employer. He was a man who lived alone in 17 rooms, surrounded by the ghost of a woman he'd loved. "What's your name?" he asked. The question hit her like a physical blow. 3 years, 1,095 shifts. He'd never asked. "Elena, sir. Elena Morales." "How long have you worked here, Elena?" 3 years, Mr. Whitmore." He nodded slowly as if filing away this information. "And do you enjoy the work?" What kind of question was that? Did anyone enjoy scrubbing toilets at 2 a.m.? "It's a good job, sir," she said carefully. "I'm grateful for it." "That's not what I asked." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. It pays well, better than most positions. But do you enjoy it? She met his eyes, really met them, for the first time in 3 years. They were blue-grey, the color of the Atlantic during a storm. Intelligent eyes, sad eyes. "No, sir," she said honestly. "I don't." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "At least you're honest. That's rare in my world." He turned back to the window, and Elena understood she was dismissed. She fled to the safety of the linen closet, her hands pressed against her racing heart. What was that? Why had he asked her those questions? Had she said too much? Not enough? She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 57 minutes until her shift ended. Then she had class at NYU, Music Theory 2 with Professor Chen, who thought she had potential if she'd only take more risks with her compositions. Easy to say when you weren't cleaning toilets to afford tuition. In his study, James Whitmore stared at the cooling coffee and thought about honesty. Marjorie's email had arrived at 5:47 a.m., 13 pages of information about Elena Morales, compiled with the ruthless efficiency his assistant was famous for. Age 28 education, NYU Steinhardt. Music composition, part-time senior year. Previous employment, waitress, Joe's Pizza, West Village. Retail clerk, Strand Bookstore. Subway performer, various stations. Family, mother in Queens. Father deceased, younger brother at CUNY audition history. 47 attempts over 6 years, various theaters and productions, current financial status. $23,000 in student loans, $847 in checking account, rent-controlled studio in Washington Heights. The report was thorough. Clinical. Devastating. Elena Morales worked 3 jobs. She slept 4 hours a night. She'd been auditioning for professional productions since she was 22 and had never gotten past the first callback. But she kept trying. James thought about the song he'd heard last night. The raw emotion, the perfect pitch, the way she'd poured herself into the music like it was the only thing keeping her alive. 47 auditions. 47 rejections. And she still sang like hope was a renewable resource. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he wanted. Thomas Chen, Dean of the Steinhardt School at NYU. They'd served on the Lincoln Center board together, back when James still did things like serve on boards. The call connected after 2 rings. "James Whitmore," Thomas's warm voice filled the line. "This is either very good news or a generous donation." "Which is it?" "Information, actually. I'm interested in establishing a scholarship, anonymous, for a music composition student." "Wonderful. We have several deserving—" "I have a specific student in mind." There was a pause. "I see. That's unusual." "I know, but I have my reasons." "I need this done quietly, Thomas. No announcements, no press releases, just a letter informing the student that their remaining tuition has been covered by an anonymous donor. May I ask why?" James looked at the cold coffee. "Let's call it penance." "For what?" "For not paying attention." Elena's music theory class met in a cramped room on the 3rd floor of the NYU building on Washington Square. 23 students crammed into space meant for 15, their instruments and backpacks creating an obstacle course of creative chaos. She slid into her usual seat in the back, next to Marcus Webb, a jazz pianist from Detroit who always smelled like expensive cologne and cheap coffee. "You look exhausted," Marcus observed, handing her half of his bagel. "Late night?" "Early morning," she corrected, accepting the offering gratefully. She'd skipped breakfast. Again. Professor Chen swept into the room like a small tornado, his arms full of sheet music, and his glasses perched precariously on his head. "Good morning, beautiful minds. Today we discuss Sondheim's use of dissonance in Being Alive. Someone please explain why it's brilliant." Elena's hand shot up before she could stop herself. Music was the one place she forgot to be invisible. "It mirrors the emotional content," she said. "The protagonist wants connection but fears it. The dissonant chords create tension that never fully resolves, just like human relationships." Professor Chen beamed. "Exactly. Miss Morales, you have the soul of a composer. Now if only you'd trust yourself enough to let that soul show in your own work." The familiar frustration bubbled up in Elena's chest. "I'm trying, Professor. Try harder. Take risks. The scholarship committee for next year's study abroad program in Vienna We'll be looking for bold voices, not safe ones. Elena nodded, even though she knew she'd never apply. She couldn't afford to study abroad. She could barely afford to study here. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her mother. "Tu hermano needs money for books. Can you help?" Always. The answer was always yes, even when her checking account had 3 digits and 2 of them were after the decimal point. Elena typed back, "I'll send $200 on Friday." That was her audition fee for the Minskoff Theatre tryouts. Gone. Evaporated. Like every other dream she'd ever had. She put her head down on the desk and tried not to cry. Marcus nudged her gently. "Hey, you okay?" "Just tired," she lied. "You're always tired." "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" Elena thought about last night, singing in the silent penthouse, pouring her heart into music no one would ever hear. Was that for herself? Or was it just another form of work, practice for a career that would never happen? "I don't remember," she said finally. And that, she realized, was the truest thing she'd said all day. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Elena found it wedged in her mailbox between a Con Edison bill and a flyer for cheap pizza delivery. The NYU logo gleamed in the corner, official, intimidating, probably another reminder about her outstanding balance. She climbed the 4 flights to her studio apartment in Washington Heights, her legs aching from the morning shift. The building smelled like Mrs. Rodriguez's cooking on the 2nd floor. Sancocho, rich and comforting. Elena's stomach growled in response. Inside her apartment, all 300 square feet of it, Elena dropped her bag and opened the letter while standing in the kitchenette that doubled as her dining room, office, and sometimes stage. "Dear Miss Morales, it is our pleasure to inform you that you have been selected as the recipient of the Caroline Whitmore Memorial Scholarship for Musical Excellence. This full scholarship covers all remaining tuition, fees, and educational expenses for the duration of your program at NYU Steinhardt. The donor wishes to remain anonymous, but wanted you to know that your talent and dedication have not gone unnoticed." The letter continued, but Elena couldn't read through the tears blurring her vision. Caroline Whitmore. The name punched through her chest like a fist. The dead wife. The woman whose silver-framed photograph Elena dusted every Thursday. The ghost who haunted that 5th Avenue penthouse more thoroughly than any living person ever could. This couldn't be a coincidence. Elena's hands shook as she read the letter again. Full scholarship. No more splitting tips 3 ways at Joe's Pizza. No more choosing between textbooks and groceries. No more guilt every time her mother called asking for help. Freedom. Actual, tangible freedom. But at what cost? She grabbed her phone and called Marcus. "Please tell me you're calling to say you're coming out tonight," he answered. "There's a jazz showcase in the village, and I need a wingman." "Marcus, I got a scholarship." Silence, then, "What? Elena, that's incredible. Which one?" "The Caroline Whitmore Memorial Scholarship." Her voice cracked on the name. "Full ride, everything paid." "Wait, Whitmore? Like the Whitmore who owns half of Manhattan? That Whitmore?" "His dead wife, actually." "Okay, that's kind of morbid, but also amazing. Why do you sound like someone died?" "Because I think my boss arranged this." Another pause. "Your cleaning job boss? Why would he—" Marcus stopped. "Oh my God. Does he know?" Elena sank onto her futon, which was also her couch, which was also her bed. "I don't know, maybe. He asked me my name this morning. First time in 3 years. That's either really creepy or really romantic." "It's neither. I don't know what it is. Marcus, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's a scholarship. There's a difference. From my employer. That's definitely weird." "Eleanor." Marcus's voice softened. "When was the last time something good happened to you? Just something purely, completely good?" She thought about it. Couldn't remember. "Maybe you're overthinking this," Marcus continued. "Maybe it's just the universe finally paying attention. Take the win." After they hung up, Elena sat in the growing darkness of her apartment and stared at the letter. The Caroline Whitmore Memorial Scholarship, a dead woman's name buying her freedom. She thought about James Whitmore's sad, storm-colored eyes. The way he'd looked at her that morning, really looked, like she was a person instead of a service. Had he heard her singing? Is that why? The thought made her skin go hot and cold simultaneously. The idea of him watching her in that private moment, seeing her be vulnerable and real and desperate. It felt like being caught naked. But if he had heard her, and if he had somehow arranged this scholarship, then he'd seen her. Not invisible furniture, not the ghost of midnight. He'd seen Elena, and maybe, just maybe, that meant she'd been worth seeing all along. James Whitmore stood in the music room for the first time in 5 years. The Steinway gleamed under the chandelier, polished to perfection. Elena's work, he realized. She'd been maintaining this room, keeping it alive, while he'd been treating it like a tomb. He sat on the piano bench and opened the key cover. The ivory keys were pristine, not a speck of dust. He pressed middle C. The note rang out clear and true, perfectly in tune. "She's been having it tuned," Marjorie said from the doorway. "Every 6 months. I found the invoices." James turned. His assistant stood with her tablet, ever efficient, ever knowing exactly what he needed before he asked. "Put it in her performance review," James said. "A bonus for initiative. Already done. Though I should mention that the cleaning service might find it odd that you're suddenly taking such an interest in one employee." "Then don't tell them." Marjorie smiled, a rare expression on her usually stern face. "The scholarship has been processed. Miss Morales should receive notification today." "Good. There's something else." Marjorie tapped her tablet. "I took the liberty of researching her audition history. She's talented. The callbacks prove that. But she keeps auditioning for roles that are wrong for her voice type." James frowned. "Wrong how?" "She's a soprano with a 3-octave range, but she keeps trying out for belt roles. It's like watching a classical violinist audition for a rock band. Technically brilliant, but fundamentally mismatched. Can that be fixed?" "With the right coaching, absolutely. I know someone, Catherine Flores, vocal coach for 3 Broadway stars. She's expensive, but set it up. Anonymous gift. Some kind of contest or award." "James." Marjorie closed her tablet. "Can I ask what we're doing here? We're giving someone a chance. You give people chances all the time. You've endowed scholarships, funded arts programs, built concert halls. This is different. This is personal." James stood and closed the piano. Caroline would have liked her. It was the first time he'd said his wife's name out loud in months. The word hung in the air between them, painful and precious. Marjorie's expression softened. Yes, she would have. That night, Elena returned to the penthouse at 2 a.m. as usual. But everything felt different now. The marble floors she mopped, the windows she cleaned, the piano she dusted, they all belonged to a man who might have given her a future, or who might be playing some elaborate rich person game she didn't understand. She found an envelope on the piano. Thick, expensive paper. Her name written in masculine handwriting. Elena. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "There's a vocal coaching opportunity available through the Broadway Artists Initiative. Application deadline is tomorrow. Thought you might be interested. A friend." Tucked behind the note was a printed application form and a stamped, addressed envelope. Elena's hands trembled as she read the requirements. Performance video, personal statement, references. The kind of opportunity that usually required connections she didn't have and money she couldn't spare. But here it was, handed to her like a gift. She looked around the silent penthouse, half expecting James Whitmore to materialize from the shadows. But she was alone with the sleeping city and a piano that suddenly felt less like a ghost and more like a promise. Elena pulled out her phone and set it up to record. If this was charity, fine. If this was pity, okay. If this was some weird rich person whim, she could live with that. But she wasn't going to waste it. She sat at the piano, positioned her phone and pressed record. Then Elena Morales sang like her life depended on it. Because maybe, finally, it did. 2 weeks later, Elena stood outside Catherine Flores' studio in Midtown, her palms sweating despite the October chill. The building was the kind of place where Broadway legends were born, all exposed brick and framed playbills, and the faint echo of scales being practiced behind soundproof doors. She'd gotten the coaching spot, 4 weeks of intensive training with one of the best vocal coaches in New York, completely free through the Broadway Artists Initiative, which she'd Googled extensively and found exactly nothing about. The door to Studio 4B opened, and a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair and the posture of a ballet dancer smiled at her. "Elena Morales? I'm Catherine. Come in, come in." We have work to do." The session was brutal. Catherine pulled apart every technique Elena had taught herself, every habit she'd developed from years of subway performances and amateur showcases. "You're singing like you're apologizing for taking up space," Catherine said, not unkindly. "Big voice, small presence. We're going to fix that." By the end of 2 hours, Elena's throat hurt, and her pride was bruised. But something had shifted. She'd hit notes she didn't know she could reach, found power in her voice she'd been hiding. "You have a gift," Catherine said as Elena packed up. "But gifts mean nothing if you don't believe you deserve them. So here's your homework. Stand in front of a mirror every morning and say, 'I belong here,' until you believe it." "That sounds like therapy, not vocal coaching," Catherine laughed. "In this business, they're the same thing. See you next week." Elena floated down the stairs and out into the Manhattan afternoon. She had 3 hours before her night shift at the penthouse, time enough to grab coffee and work on her composition assignment for Professor Chen. She headed to her favorite spot, a tiny cafe in the West Village called the Beanery, where the coffee was decent and they let students camp out for hours without judgment. Marcus was already there, his laptop open, jazz playing through his headphones. "Hey, superstar," he said, pulling out an earbud. "How was the coaching?" "Intense. Amazing. Terrifying." Elena collapsed into the chair across from him. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." "You're finally admitting you have a crush on me." "I'm serious." His smile faded. "Okay, what's wrong?" "I think my boss is behind all of this. The scholarship, the coaching, everything, and I don't know what to do about it." Marcus closed his laptop. "Did he say something?" "No. That's the problem. He doesn't say anything, but weird things keep happening. The scholarship is named after his dead wife. The coaching program doesn't seem to actually exist, and he's been different lately." "Different how?" Elena struggled to find the words. "He sees me now, like actually sees me. He asked my name. He leaves the study door open when I'm cleaning. Yesterday, I found a stack of Broadway playbills on the table, shows from this season, like someone was researching current productions. Maybe he likes theater. He hasn't left that apartment for anything but work in 3 years. I'd know. I see the evidence of his entire life." Marcus leaned back, processing. "So what are you going to do? Confront him?" "I don't know. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm being paranoid and all of this is just coincidence?" "Elena, you're the least paranoid person I know. You think the best of everyone. If your gut is telling you something's weird, it's probably weird." She pulled out her phone and stared at the blank screen. "I could just text him. Ask him directly." "Do you have his number?" "No, I have the house line, and his assistant's email." "That's not exactly personal." Elena bit her lip. "I could leave him a note, tonight at the house." "And say what?" "The truth. That I know what he's doing. That I'm grateful, but I need to understand why." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're brave, you know that. Most people would just take the free ride and not ask questions. I'm not most people, and if there's one thing my mother taught me, it's that everything has a price. I just need to know what this one costs." James sat in his office at Whitmore Properties, staring at the architectural renderings for the Hudson Yards project without really seeing them. His phone buzzed with the 17th email of the day, but he ignored it. He was thinking about Elena. He'd been thinking about Elena a lot lately, which was problematic for approximately 47 reasons, starting with "she works for you" and ending with "you're possibly the worst person to be thinking about anyone romantically given your spectacular failure at your last relationship." Caroline had been dead for 5 years, but guilt was a patient companion. His phone rang. "Marjorie, your 3 o'clock cancelled," she said. "And before you use that as an excuse to work late, you have a personal invitation." "Not interested." "It's from Richard Castellano. He's directing a showcase at the Belasco Theatre next month. Small productions, emerging talent. He wants you there." James frowned. "Why would Richard invite me to anything? I haven't spoken to him since Caroline's funeral." "Perhaps because you donated $50,000 to his theatre company last week?" James said nothing. "James, you donated to a company that specializes in giving unknown performers their first big break. The same week that a certain night cleaning employee started vocal coaching. Would you like to tell me what's going on?" "I'm supporting the arts." "You're doing something, but I'm not sure it's that." Marjorie's voice softened. "Be careful. This woman doesn't know you're helping her. When she finds out, and she will find out, she's going to feel manipulated. I'm not manipulating anyone. Then what are you doing? James looked out his window at the Manhattan skyline. I'm trying to fix a mistake. What mistake? Not seeing her. For 3 years, she was invisible to me. I'm trying to make up for that. By secretly funding her entire career. By giving her the opportunities she deserves. There's a difference. Is there? James, I know you mean well, but this isn't charity. This is personal. And personal is messy. He knew she was right. But he couldn't stop. Every time he thought about quitting this strange crusade, he remembered Elena's voice in the darkness. The way she sang like music was oxygen. Send Richard my acceptance, he said. I'll attend the showcase. After he hung up, James pulled up the security footage from the penthouse, a habit he'd developed recently that he wasn't proud of. The cameras didn't cover the music room. Caroline had insisted on privacy there, but they caught Elena arriving, leaving, moving through the halls with practiced efficiency. Tonight's footage showed her at 2:03 a.m., right on schedule. But instead of heading to the storage closet with her supplies, she walked straight to his study. She looked directly at the camera, then she held up a piece of paper. James zoomed in, his heart pounding. The note read, "We need to talk. Elena." Elena left the note on his desk, weighted down with a crystal paperweight shaped like the Chrysler Building. Then she went to the music room and waited. She didn't have to wait long. At 2:47 a.m., the private elevator chimed. Footsteps crossed the marble foyer, purposeful, unhesitant, coming straight toward her. James Whitmore appeared in the doorway, still wearing his suit from work, his tie loosened. He looked at her sitting on the piano bench, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "You know," he said finally. "I know." "How long?" The scholarship was pretty obvious. The coaching program that doesn't exist sealed it. He winced. "I should have been more careful." "Why did you do it?" Elena stood, her hands clenched at her sides. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm the person who cleans your toilet. Why would you care about my music career?" "Because you're not nobody." His voice was rough, urgent. "And you never were. I just failed to see it." "That's not an answer." James stepped into the room, and Elena saw exhaustion written in every line of his face. "I heard you. 2 weeks ago. I came home early from a trip, and I heard you singing. Right here at this piano." Heat flooded Elena's face. "You were spying on me. I was standing in my own home. You were the one trespassing. I clean here. I have keys." "You have keys to clean, not to perform private concerts." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the air crackling with tension. Then James's expression cracked. "I'm sorry. That came out wrong. Elena, I'm not angry. I'm grateful." "For what?" "You brought music back into this place. For 5 years this room was dead, and you brought it back to life without even knowing I could hear you. That takes a special kind of magic." Elena felt tears threatening. "So you decided to—" "What?" "Buy me a career. I decided to give you the same chances that people with money and connections get handed every day. That's not charity. That's equity. That's manipulation. Is it? Even if my intentions were good? Intentions don't matter if the outcome is the same. You made me feel like I earned something that was actually just given to me. You did earn it." James moved closer, his storm blue eyes intense. "You earned it with every hour you practiced, every audition you survived, every time you got back up after rejection. I just removed some of the obstacles that shouldn't have been in your way to begin with." Elena wanted to stay angry. She really did. But exhaustion and hope and 3 years of invisibility were colliding in her chest, and she couldn't hold on to the fury. "I need to know this is real," she whispered, "that I'm good enough. Not because some rich man decided to play fairy godfather, but because I actually have talent." James's hand moved toward her face, then stopped, falling back to his side. "You're good enough, more than good enough, and I'm going to prove it to you." "How?" "Give me 3 months, let me open doors, then you walk through them on your own merit. If you fail, it's not because I didn't help enough. If you succeed, it's because you deserve to." "And what do you get out of this?" The question hung between them like a challenge. James looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Maybe," he said softly, I get to stop being invisible too. The Belasco Theatre glowed like a jewel box on West 44th Street. Elena stood across the street, staring at the marquee, her heart hammering against her ribs. Emerging Voices Showcase, one night only. Her name was on the list. Sixth from the bottom, tiny letters that still felt like a miracle. Elena Morales. "You're going to wear a hole in the pavement," Marcus said, appearing at her elbow with 2 coffees. "It's just a showcase. No big deal." "It's the Belasco Theatre, Marcus. Sondheim performed here. This is not no big deal. You've been coaching with Catherine for 6 weeks. You're ready." Elena took the coffee, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. 6 weeks since the confrontation with James. 6 weeks of the strangest arrangement she'd ever been part of. The rules were simple. James would continue opening doors. Elena would walk through them on her own merit, and they would maintain professional distance, employer and employee, nothing more. Except it wasn't nothing more. She saw him differently now. The way he listened to her practice some nights, sitting in the hallway just out of sight. The way he'd started leaving books on the piano, biographies of performers, collections of sheet music, a first edition of Sondheim's Finishing the Hat that probably cost more than her rent. He never pushed, never asked for gratitude, just quietly created space for her to become whoever she was meant to be. It was infuriating and wonderful in equal measure. "Is he coming tonight?" Marcus asked, reading her mind like he always did. "I don't know. Maybe. He knows Richard Castellano, the director. And that doesn't feel weird? Your secret benefactor watching you perform? Everything about this feels weird." Elena checked her phone. 2 hours until call time. "I need to go home and change. You're still coming, right?" "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this for anything. Break a leg, superstar." James stood in his closet, staring at ties like they held the secrets of the universe. This was ridiculous. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. He'd presented architectural plans to the city council, given speeches at the Met Gala, survived 5 years of suffocating grief. But choosing what to wear to Elena's showcase felt impossibly complicated. "The blue one," Marjorie called from the doorway. "It brings out your eyes." "I'm not trying to bring out anything. You're trying to look supportive but not creepy. The blue one says I respect your talent without saying I'm obsessed with you." James grabbed the blue tie. "I'm not obsessed. You've rearranged your entire schedule around her coaching sessions so you can accidentally be home when she practices. You're a little obsessed." He couldn't argue with that. Marjorie stepped into the closet, her expression uncharacteristically soft. "She's good for you, you know. I haven't seen you this alive in years. I barely know her. You know her better than you think. You know she takes her coffee with too much sugar. You know she hums while she cleans. You know she cries during sad movies because she leaves wadded tissues in the screening room trash. You know her, James. You just haven't had a real conversation yet. Tonight's not about me, it's about her performance. Tonight's about both of you figuring out what happens next." The backstage area of the Belasco smelled like hairspray and nervous energy. Elena stood in the wings watching the 5th performer, a tenor with a voice like butter, nail his aria. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Catherine appeared beside her, elegant in a black dress, her silver hair swept up. "Breathe. You know this song backwards and forwards. What if I freeze?" Then you freeze and the world keeps turning. "Elena, this isn't life or death. This is you sharing your gift. Stop making it bigger than it is." Easy for you to say. "You're not the one about to humiliate herself in front of Broadway royalty." Catherine smiled. "I threw up in a trash can before my debut at Carnegie Hall, still had a career. You'll be fine." The tenor finished to enthusiastic applause. The stage manager touched Elena's shoulder. "You're up." She walked onto the stage, her legs somehow carrying her forward, even though her brain was screaming at her to run. The spotlight was blinding. She couldn't see the audience, which was both terrifying and a relief. The piano intro started. Her own composition, the one Professor Chen had called too risky 3 months ago. The one about invisible women and secret dreams. Elena opened her mouth and sang. The first note came out shaky, the second stronger. By the third line, she forgot about the audience, forgot about James possibly watching, forgot about everything except the music pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. She sang about cleaning floors while dreaming of stages. about being invisible in the light and visible only in darkness, about the courage it took to keep trying when the world kept saying no. The final note hung in the air, fragile and defiant. Then silence. Devastating, horrible silence. Eleanor's heart sank. She'd failed. The applause hit like a wave. Not polite appreciation, but genuine, enthusiastic response. People stood. Someone whistled. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears as she took her bow and fled the stage. Backstage, Catherine caught her in a hug. "You did it. You actually did it. I couldn't see anything. I don't even know if I hit all the notes. You did more than hit notes. You told the truth, that's what matters." Marcus burst through the backstage door, his face split in a grin. "Eleanor, there are people asking about you, actual Broadway people." Before she could process that, Richard Castellano himself appeared, a compact man with wild grey hair and the energy of someone who'd drunk 6 espressos. "Elena Morales," he said, shaking her hand vigorously. "That was extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Is that an original composition?" "Yes, sir. I want to talk to you about a workshop I'm putting together. New voices, original material. Are you interested?" Elena's brain short-circuited. Yes, definitely yes." "Excellent. Give your information to my assistant. We'll be in touch." He swept away, and Elena stood frozen in the aftermath. "Did that just happen?" she whispered to Marcus. "That just happened. You're getting a workshop on Broadway, a real, actual—" "Eleanor!" The voice cut through the chaos. She turned. James Whitmore stood at the edge of the backstage area, somehow looking both completely in place and utterly out of his element. He wore a dark suit and the blue tie that made his eyes even more intense. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and Elena felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous and inevitable. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, suddenly formal in front of Marcus and Catherine and the chaos of performers. "You were remarkable," James said simply. "I wanted to tell you in person. Thank you for coming." The words were mundane, professional, but the way he looked at her, like she'd hung the moon and stars, was anything but professional. "I should let you celebrate with your friends," James said, already backing away. "Congratulations, Elena, you earned this." He disappeared into the crowd before she could respond. Marcus whistled low. "Okay." That was intense. "Shut up. I'm just saying, the man looks at you like—" "Marcus, don't." But she knew what Marcus was going to say because she'd felt it too. The electricity in the air when James had said her name. The way her heart had jumped at the sight of him in the audience. This was getting complicated. This was getting very, very complicated. 2 weeks later, Eleanor sat in the penthouse music room at 3 a.m., working on new material for Richard's workshop. The city sprawled below her, a constellation of lights and possibilities. She heard the elevator chime, footsteps. Then James appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need this," he said. It had become their routine, the unspoken agreement that the music room was neutral territory, a place where employer and employee disappeared, leaving just 2 people who understood loneliness. "Can't sleep?" Elena asked, accepting the tea. "Never can." James sat in the armchair by the window, his usual spot. "What are you working on?" "Something for the workshop. It's about transitions. Moving from one life to another, not quite fitting in either place." "Sounds lonely." "It is." Elena played a few chords. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being in between is where the interesting stuff happens." James was quiet for a moment. "Caroline used to say something similar. She said the best art comes from discomfort." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife directly to her. Eleanor felt the weight of the confidence. "Tell me about her," Eleanor said softly. "She would have liked you. She believed in taking risks, in giving people chances. She used to drag me to experimental theater productions in warehouses in Brooklyn, tiny shows that no one else cared about. She said that's where you found the real artists. She sounds wonderful." She was. And I failed her. Eleanor looked up, startled. "What?" "I was always working, always building the next project, making the next deal. She wanted me to slow down, to actually live our life instead of just building the backdrop for it. I kept promising I would. Next year, next month, next week, and then she died and I'd missed everything that mattered." The pain in his voice was so raw that Eleanor wanted to reach for him. She gripped her tea instead. "That's why you're doing this," she said. "Helping me. You're trying to make up for missing her. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to finally pay attention before it's too late." Their eyes met across the room. The air felt charged, dangerous. "James," Elena said carefully, "what are we doing here?" "I don't know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to stop." Neither did she. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The photograph appeared in the New York Post's page 6, 3 days before the workshop premiere. Elena was having coffee with Marcus at the Beanery when her phone exploded with notifications. Text after text, email after email, all containing the same link. The headline read, "Billionaire's Cinderella, Whitmore's Mysterious Muse." Below it, a grainy photograph taken outside the Belasco Theatre. James, in his blue tie, looking at Elena with an expression that even a blind person could read, and beside it, another photo. Elena entering the Fifth Avenue penthouse at 2 a.m., cleaning supplies visible through the lobby windows. "Oh, no," Marcus whispered. "Oh, Elena." "No." She read the article with growing horror. James Whitmore, the reclusive real estate mogul, who hasn't been seen at a social event since his wife's death 5 years ago, made a surprise appearance at the Belasco Theatre's Emerging Voices showcase last month. Sources say he was there to support Elena Morales, 28, a part-time student and cleaning woman who works in his Fifth Avenue penthouse. Morales recently received the Caroline Whitmore Memorial Scholarship, a previously unknown scholarship, bearing the name of Whitmore's late wife, and has been taking private vocal coaching sessions with Broadway coach Catherine Flores. Coincidence? You decide. The article went on, speculating about their relationship, questioning whether her talent was real or purchased, suggesting that she was some kind of gold digger who'd seduced a grieving widower. Elena's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. "It's going to be okay," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Her phone rang. "Catherine." "Elena, have you seen—" "I've seen it. Listen to me very carefully. This is a test. How you respond to this will define your career. You can let it destroy you or you can use it, but you need to decide right now what story you want to tell." "I don't know what story to tell. They're making me look like some opportunist who slept her way into a career." "Did you sleep with him?" "No." "Then you have nothing to be ashamed of. A wealthy man believed in your talent and chose to support it. That's patronage, not prostitution. The Medicis supported Michelangelo. Should we burn the Sistine Chapel?" Despite everything, Elena almost laughed. "That's not the same thing." "Isn't it? Look, the workshop is in 3 days. You can hide, or you can show up and prove every word of that article wrong. Your choice." After Catherine hung up, Elena sat in the cafe staring at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. 3 years of invisible labor, 6 months of the hardest work of her life, and now everyone would think it was all fake, purchased by a rich man's guilt or desire or pity. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. We need to talk. J." James sat in his office, watching his entire life implode on social media. His assistant had already fielded 17 calls from reporters, 12 from business associates asking, what the hell was he thinking? And one from his mother-in-law that had ended with her hanging up on him. He'd done this. He'd destroyed Elena's credibility before she'd even had a chance to prove herself. The door opened without a knock. Marjorie, her face grim. "She's here." James stood. "Elena?" "In the lobby. She says she needs to speak with you." "Security called because she's technically not authorized to be here during business hours." The irony would have been funny if everything wasn't falling apart. "Send her up." 5 minutes later, Elena walked into his office. She wore jeans and a NYU sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She looked furious. "Did you know?" she demanded. "Did you know someone was watching us?" "No. God, no." "Elena, I would never. Everyone thinks I'm sleeping with you. Everyone thinks my talent is fake. Do you understand what you've done?" "I'm trying to fix it. My publicist is drafting a statement." "A statement?" She laughed bitterly. "What are you going to say?" "Don't worry, folks. I just gave this girl a full scholarship, private coaching, and multiple opportunities out of the goodness of my heart. No ulterior motives here. That'll go over great." James moved toward her, then stopped. Tell me how to fix this. You can't. That's the problem. Every door you opened, every opportunity you created, they're all tainted now. No one will believe I earned anything on my own merit. You did earn it. Your performance at the Belasco was at a showcase funded by your donation, don't you see? It's all connected. Every single thing in my life for the past 6 months leads back to you. The truth of that hung between them like an accusation. So what do you want me to do? James asked quietly. Walk away, pretend I never heard you sing, let you go back to being invisible? Maybe that would be better. At least when I was invisible, I was mine. Now I'm just the punchline to some rich man's midlife crisis. The words hit like a slap. James flinched. Is that what you think this is? His voice was dangerously soft. A midlife crisis. I don't know what this is. That's the problem. I'll tell you what it is. James closed the distance between them, his control finally snapping. It's me watching someone with extraordinary talent waste away in the shadows because the world doesn't give people like you chances. It's me trying to fix a system that's rigged against anyone who wasn't born with money and connections. And yes, it's also me falling for a woman who sings like she's breathing and looks at the world like it's still capable of magic, despite every reason she has to be bitter. Elena stared at him, her eyes wide. You're falling for me? I fell for you the first night I heard you sing. Everything since then has just been me trying to figure out what to do about it. You can't. We can't. This is impossible. Why? Because you're my employer. Because there's a power imbalance the size of Manhattan between us. Because everyone will always think I'm with you for your money, or that you're with me because you can control me. I don't want to control you. I want to support you. It's the same thing when you have all the power. The silence after that was deafening. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. I need to quit. The cleaning job, the scholarship, all of it. I need to go back to doing this on my own. That's pride talking. No, that's dignity talking. There's a difference. She turned toward the door. Tell your publicist that Elena Morales thanks Mr. Whitmore for his generosity, but will be pursuing her career independently from this point forward. That should kill the story. Elena, wait. Goodbye, James. She walked out, and James let her go because he didn't know what else to do. After the door closed, he stood in the empty office and felt the return of the familiar emptiness that had consumed him for 5 years. Except this time, it was worse. Because now he knew what it felt like to not be alone. Elena made it all the way to the subway before she broke down crying. She sat on the bench at the 59th Street station, mascara-less tears streaming down her face, while commuters flowed around her like water around a stone. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Where are you? Columbus Circle Station. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat beside her on the bench, his arm around her shoulders. Are you quit? I quit everything. The job, the scholarship, the workshop. Elena, don't. Please don't tell me I'm making a mistake. I know I am. But I can't do this, Marcus. I can't be someone's project or charity case or guilty conscience. I need to be me, even if that me never makes it to Broadway. Marcus pulled her closer. Okay. Then we figure out Plan B. What's Plan B? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together. Elena rested her head on his shoulder and watched the trains come and go, carrying people to destinations she'd never reach. Her phone buzzed again. Professor Chen. Elena, I saw the article. Are you all right? Not really, Professor. I want you to know that Richard Castellano called me this afternoon. He's still expecting you at the workshop. He said, and I quote, "Talent doesn't care about tabloids. So whatever you're thinking about doing, don't quit before Friday." Elena closed her eyes. I already did. Then unquit. You've worked too hard to let some gossip column destroy everything. Show up. Prove them wrong. That's what artists do. After he hung up, Elena looked at Marcus. He's right, Marcus said. You know he's right. I don't know if I can face everyone. So don't face everyone. Face yourself. The Elena who sang on that stage was fearless. Find her again. Elena pulled out her phone and looked at the page 6 article one more time. Then she looked at James's text, still unanswered. I'm so sorry, this is my fault, we need to talk. Jay. She typed a response. The workshop is Friday at 8 p.m. If you want to talk, come to the performance. I'll say everything I need to say on stage. Then she stood up, wiped her eyes, and headed home to write the most honest song of her life. If the world wanted to see what James Whitmore's money had bought, she'd show them exactly what she was worth, with or without him. The rehearsal space on West 42nd Street smelled like coffee and ambition. Elena arrived 2 hours early for the workshop, her guitar case heavy on her shoulder, her new song printed on paper that still smelled like ink. Richard Castellano was already there, reviewing notes with his assistant. "Elena," he said, looking up, "I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. I read the article. Bunch of garbage, if you ask me. The only question that matters is, can you perform? Can you tell a story that makes people feel something? I think so. Then nothing else matters. Show me what you've got." Eleanor pulled out her guitar, a battered acoustic she'd bought used on Craigslist 6 years ago. It had scratches and dings and a string that always went slightly flat, but it was hers. Purchased with money she'd earned. No one could take that away. The song was called Invisible. She'd written it in one sitting, pouring out everything she felt about being seen and unseen, wanted and unwanted, supported and suffocated. She played it through once, her voice raw and honest. When she finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. "That's the one," he finally said. "That's your opening number tonight." "Opening? I thought I was in the middle of the lineup." "Not anymore. You're going first. I want the audience to hear that before they hear anything else. Can you handle that?" Elena thought about the Page 6 article, about everyone in that audience who would come expecting to see a fraud, about James, who might or might not show up. "Yes," she said, "I can handle it." By 7:30 p.m., the small theatre was packed. Eleanor watched from backstage as people filed in. Some she recognized from the Belasco showcase, others who were clearly there because of the scandal. She could hear whispers, see phones out, feel the weight of judgment before she'd even stepped on stage. Marcus found her in the green room. "You okay?" "Terrified." "Good. Terror means you care." He squeezed her hand. "You've got this. And hey, if it goes badly, we can always move to Canada and start over." "That's your plan B?" "I've got a cousin in Toronto. Good theatre scene." Despite everything, Elena laughed. Catherine appeared in the doorway. "5 minutes, you ready?" "No." "Perfect. The best performances come from that edge where you're not quite ready. Trust yourself, Elena. You've earned this moment." Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked to the wings and looked out at the audience. The house lights were still up. She could see faces, phones, the gleam of jewelry and expectation. And there, in the back row, standing against the wall because all the seats were taken, was James. He wore a simple dark sweater and jeans. No tie, no suit. He looked tired and hopeful, and completely out of place among the theatre crowd. Their eyes met across the distance. Elena turned away before she could lose her nerve. The lights went down. The audience quieted. Richard's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New Voices Workshop. Tonight you'll hear original work from some of the most exciting emerging artists in New York. We begin with Elena Morales." Eleanor walked onto the stage, her guitar in hand, her heart in her throat. The spotlight hit her, and for a moment she was blind. Then her eyes adjusted, and she could see the dark shapes of the audience, the red exit signs, the way James had moved closer, standing where she could see him if she looked. She didn't look. Instead, Elena sat on the stool center stage, adjusted the microphone, and began to play. "This song is called Invisible," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "It's about what happens when someone finally sees you, and you realize you were visible all along, you just weren't looking at yourself." The first chord rang out clear and true. Then she began to sing. She sang about cleaning floors at 2 a.m., about dreams deferred, about the weight of being grateful for crumbs when you deserved the whole feast. She sang about someone who saw her potential, but couldn't see the cost of their generosity. She sang about learning that support and control sometimes wore the same face, but mostly she sang about finding her voice, not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd always had it. She just hadn't believed it was worth hearing. The song built to a crescendo, her voice filling every corner of the small theatre, and Elena felt something break open in her chest. Not sadness, not anger, something bigger, freedom. She hit the final note, let it ring out, then let it fade into silence. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then the audience erupted. People stood cheering, and Elena saw tears on faces in the front row. She saw Richard nodding with a small smile. She saw Catherine with her hand over her heart. And she saw James, still standing in the back, his face raw with emotion, not clapping but just watching her like she was the only person in the world. Elena stood, took her bow, and walked off stage on shaking legs. Backstage, she collapsed against the wall, adrenaline and relief flooding through her in equal measure. "Eleanor," Richard appeared, gripping her shoulders. "That was extraordinary. I'm offering you a spot in my spring production. Original musical, lead role, your songs. Are you interested?" Elena's brain short-circuited. "Are you serious?" "Completely. We'll work out details later, but I want you to know right now, you have a future in this business. On your own merit. Anyone who says otherwise can answer to me." After he left, Elena sat in the green room staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked different somehow. Older, stronger, like someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side with evidence that she could survive. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. "You were extraordinary. I'm outside when you're ready to talk. No pressure. I'll wait as long as it takes." Elena stared at the message for a long moment. Then she stood, grabbed her guitar and walked toward the stage door. James stood on West 42nd Street, watching the theater crowd disperse into the November night. His hands were shoved in his pockets, his heart beating too fast, wondering if Elena would actually come out or if she'd leave through another exit to avoid him. He wouldn't blame her if she did. Then the stage door opened, and there she was. Elena stood in the doorway, her guitar case over her shoulder, wearing jeans and a vintage Broadway t-shirt that was probably older than she was. She looked exhausted and radiant. "Hi," she said. "Hi." James didn't move, afraid that if he stepped closer, she'd bolt. There aren't words for what you were. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it for anything." He paused. "Richard offered you a show, didn't he?" "How did you know?" "Because I watched the same performance everyone else did. You're undeniable, Eleanor. You always were." She stepped out onto the sidewalk, letting the door close behind her. "I need to say something, and I need you to not interrupt until I'm done." "Okay." Eleanor took a breath. "I was angry at you. I'm still angry at you, if I'm honest. You made decisions about my life without asking me. You created opportunities that I'll always wonder if I truly earned. You saw me at my most vulnerable and used that information without my consent. Those things were wrong, and they hurt." James nodded, his throat tight. "But," Eleanor continued, "I also need to acknowledge that you believed in me when I was starting to stop believing in myself. You gave me resources I wouldn't have had otherwise. You didn't ask for anything in return. And tonight when I sang that song, which was partially about you, by the way, you stood there and let me expose you in front of everyone without trying to defend yourself or control the narrative. I deserved it. Maybe. But not everyone would have taken it with such grace." She shifted her guitar case. "I don't know what we are, James. I don't know if we can be anything, given how this all started. But I know I don't want to walk away without at least figuring out who we could be if we started over. Honestly, this time." James felt something crack open in his chest, the armor he'd been wearing for 5 years finally breaking apart. "I'd like that," he said quietly. "Starting over. Being honest. Then let's start with this. My name is Elena Morales. I'm a composer and performer. I work 3 jobs, I have student loans, and I stress-eat pizza at 2 a.m. I'm terrified of failure and success in equal measure, and I'm standing here talking to you because somewhere in the mess of the last 6 months, I started to care about you. Not Mr. Whitmore, the billionaire. James, the man who sits in the dark listening to music because it makes him feel less alone." James stepped closer. "My name is James Whitmore. I'm a workaholic who forgot how to live after my wife died. I'm terrible at relationships, I can't cook, and I've been alone so long I forgot what it felt like to want to be with someone. And I'm standing here because you reminded me that life is supposed to be more than just existing. You made me want to actually live again." They stood 2 feet apart on a busy Manhattan street, the city flowing around them like a river around stones. "So what now?" Elena asked. James smiled, a real smile, the first one she'd ever seen on his face. "Now I ask if I can take you to dinner. Not as your employer or patron, just as someone who wants to know you better. No strings, no schemes, no secret scholarships. Just dinner? Just dinner. Elena pretended to think about it. There's a Thai place in Hell's Kitchen that's open late. Best pad Thai in Manhattan, very unfancy. Sounds perfect. Then yes, you can take me to dinner. As they walked down 42nd Street together, their hands almost touching but not quite, James felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope that tomorrow might be better than today. And Elena, carrying her battered guitar and the weight of one extraordinary performance, felt something shift in her understanding of the world. Maybe being seen wasn't about someone else shining a light on you. Maybe it was about finally having the courage to step into your own light. And maybe, just maybe, having someone who wanted to stand beside you, not in front, not behind, but beside you, while you figured out how bright you could shine. 6 months later, Eleanor stood backstage at the Cherry Lane Theatre in the West Village, adjusting her costume for the 100th time. Opening night jitters had transformed her hands into unreliable instruments that couldn't seem to button anything properly. "Stop fidgeting," Marcus said, appearing with a bouquet of bodega flowers. "You're going to wear a hole in that dress." "I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it. You wrote an entire musical, you're starring in it, and there are actual paying customers out there who bought tickets with real money." Elena peeked through the curtain. The 179-seat theatre was packed. She spotted Professor Chen in the 3rd row, Catherine Flores near the aisle, Richard Castellano in the back, taking notes for his next project. And there, center orchestra, 5th row, sat James Whitmore. He wore a simple button-down shirt and looked nervous enough to be the one performing. Their eyes met across the distance, and he gave her a small wave. She waved back, her heart doing complicated gymnastics in her chest. 6 months of dinners and late-night conversations, and slowly figuring out how to be two people who cared about each other, without the weight of obligation crushing everything. 6 months of him learning to give without controlling, and her learning to receive without resentment. It hadn't been easy. They'd fought about boundaries and independence, and whether he could attend her performances without it looking like patronage. They'd nearly broken up twice. Once when he'd tried to introduce her to a producer without asking first, and once when she'd accused him of treating her career like a project he needed to manage. But they'd worked through it. Slowly, messily, honestly. And now here they were. Opening night of Invisible, her musical about a cleaning woman who found her voice. The story she'd been living, transformed into something universal. 5 minutes, the stage manager called. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. "Go be brilliant, I'll be in the front row, ugly crying." "You're supposed to be moral support." "I can multitask." Eleanor took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the scared girl who'd scrubbed toilets at 2 a.m. anymore. She was someone who'd fought for her dreams, failed, gotten back up, and kept fighting. She was visible now, and she'd made herself that way. The show opened with a single spotlight, and Elena's voice unaccompanied, singing the song she'd written 6 months ago. But this version was different. Evolved, matured, infused with everything she'd learned about herself. The audience was silent, holding their breath. Then the music swelled, the ensemble entered, and the story unfolded. A tale of invisible people finding their voices, supporting each other, learning that visibility wasn't about being seen by the powerful, but about seeing themselves clearly. There were moments of humor, a scene where the cleaning crew staged an impromptu talent show using mops as microphones. Moments of heartbreak, when the protagonist had to choose between accepting help and maintaining her pride. Moments of triumph, the finale where invisible women became undeniable forces of nature. From the 5th row, James watched Elena command the stage and felt his heart expand in ways he'd forgotten were possible. This wasn't the woman he'd first heard singing in his penthouse. This was Elena Morales, fully realized, taking up all the space she deserved, and he got to be someone who loved her. Not someone who saved her, not someone who created her, just someone who'd been lucky enough to witness her becoming. The final number brought the audience to their feet before the last note had faded. The ovation lasted 7 minutes. People whistled, stomped, cheered. Elena stood center stage, flanked by her cast, tears streaming down her face, and felt the weight of 3 years of invisibility finally lift. She'd done it, on her own terms. The after-party was at a cramped bar in the West Village that smelled like beer and possibility. The entire cast was there, plus friends, family, and various theatre people who'd heard about the show and wanted to be part of the moment. Elena's mother arrived late, her arms full of Tupperware containers of Puerto Rican food because these theatre people probably haven't eaten. "Mommy, there's food here." "This is not food, this is air with salt." She began unpacking containers of arroz con gandules, pernil, and tostones. "Eat. You're too skinny." Marcus materialized beside Elena. "Is your mom feeding the entire cast?" "It's what she does, love language carbs." James appeared through the crowd, carrying 2 drinks. He ditched his jacket, his sleeves rolled up, looking relaxed in a way he never had in a suit. "Your mother just force-fed me 3 plates of food," he said. "I think she's trying to fatten me up. She likes you, that's how you know. Should I be worried?" Elena's mother chose that moment to return, pointing at James. "You, come. I need someone tall to reach the top shelf." James looked at Elena helplessly. She grinned. "You heard the woman, go." After he left, Marcus elbowed her. "Your mom is putting him to work. That's serious. She's testing him, seeing if he'll help without being asked." Smart woman. She didn't raise any fools. Professor Chen found Elena in the chaos, his eyes suspiciously bright. "That was extraordinary work, Miss Morales. Or should I say Miss Tony Award winner in waiting?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Professor. Why not? Someone should." He handed her a card. "This is from the Vienna program. They want you for next summer. Full scholarship, teaching stipend included. And before you say anything about not being able to afford it, you can. You have a show running. You can afford your dreams now." Elena took the card, her hands shaking slightly. Vienna. The opportunity she'd thought she'd never have. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me. Thank you for never giving up on yourself." Around midnight, the party started winding down. Elena found James on the tiny back patio, staring up at the sliver of sky visible between buildings. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" "More than okay." He pulled her close and she let herself lean against him. "I was thinking about the first night I heard you sing. How different everything was." "You mean when I was your invisible cleaning woman?" "You were never invisible. I was just blind." Elena tilted her head to look up at him. "We've come a long way." "We have. And I need to tell you something." Her stomach clenched. "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise." James took a breath. "I'm selling the penthouse." Elena pulled back. "What? Why?" "Because it's a mausoleum. I've been living with ghosts for 5 years, and it's time to let them go. Caroline would want me to actually live, not just exist in the space we shared." "Where will you go?" "I found a brownstone in Brooklyn. Carroll Gardens. 3 floors, needs renovation. Has a music room with terrible acoustics that will need complete reconstruction." He paused. "It has space for 2 people, if those 2 people wanted to live together. Eventually, when they're ready." Elena's heart stuttered. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it, someday. Not now. I know you need your independence, and your terrible apartment in Washington Heights is part of your journey. But someday, when you're ready, I'd like to build a life with you. One where we're equals. Where your music room is as important as my office. Where we figure out how to be partners instead of patron and artist." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." "Is that a yes?" "It's a, let's see where we are in 6 months. But it's a hopeful, let's see." James smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'll take hopeful." They stood together in comfortable silence, the sounds of the party drifting out from inside, the city humming around them. "Can I tell you something?" Elena said. "That first night when you heard me singing, I was terrified. I thought if anyone ever heard me, they'd realize I was a fraud, that I didn't deserve to dream that big. And now? Now I know I was never a fraud. I was just invisible because I was looking down instead of forward. You didn't make me visible, James. You just held up a mirror until I finally looked at myself. That's going to make a great song lyric." Elena laughed. "Everything makes a great song lyric now. I've become insufferable." "You've become successful. There's a difference." From inside, Marcus's voice called out, "Elena, your mother is teaching everyone salsa. Get in here." They returned to find Elena's mother had somehow convinced the entire cast to learn basic salsa steps. Professor Chen was attempting to lead Catherine Flores, who was approximately twice as coordinated as he was. Marcus was teaching James, who moved with the awkward determination of someone who'd never danced a day in his life, but was willing to try. Elena watched the chaos, her past and present and future all colliding in one cramped bar in the West Village, and felt something settle in her chest. This was what success looked like. Not perfection, not fame or wealth or validation from strangers. This, people she loved, celebrating work she was proud of, with the possibility of tomorrow being even better. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw your show. Brilliant work. Let's talk about a Broadway transfer. Richard. Elena stared at the message. Broadway. The word she'd dreamed about for years, seemingly impossible, now casually appearing on her phone screen like it was meant to be there all along. She showed James the text. Are you going to respond? He asked. Tomorrow. Tonight is for celebrating what I've already accomplished. The future can wait until morning. Wise woman. I learned from experience. Dreams are important, but so is being present for the moments when they come true. As midnight turned to 1 a.m., Elena stood in the center of the crowded bar, surrounded by music and laughter and love, and realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years being invisible, trying to become someone people would notice. But the person she'd become, the one who'd written a show, starred in it, fought for her independence, loved imperfectly but honestly, she'd been there all along. She just hadn't been looking. Now she was visible. To herself most of all. And that made all the difference. The end 1 year later. The Tony nominations were announced on a Tuesday morning. Elena was in the Brownstones' half-finished music room, working on songs for her second show, when James came running up the stairs, 3 at a time. Turn on the TV, he said breathlessly. Why? Did something happen? Just turn it on. She grabbed the remote and found the live stream just as they announced Best Original Musical, Invisible, by Elena Morales. Elena dropped the remote. James caught her before she could follow it to the floor. You're nominated, he said, laughing and crying at the same time. You're nominated for a Tony. This isn't real. It's very real. Elena pulled out her phone and saw 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 from Richard, and 1 from her mother that just said, Mija! She looked around the music room, at the half-painted walls, the piano James had bought her, after asking permission this time, the framed playbill from opening night, the window overlooking the Brooklyn garden where they were planning to get married next spring. This was her life now. Real, earned, hers. I need to call everyone, she said. In a minute. James pulled her close. First, I just want to say you did this, not me, not anyone else, you. We both know that's not entirely true. It's true enough. You walked through the doors, Elena. That's what matters. She kissed him, tasting salt from his tears or hers. Impossible to tell whose were whose anymore. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for teaching me how to actually live again. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with afternoon traffic and spring sunshine. Somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus was probably already planning the Tony watch party. Her mother was calling every relative she'd ever met. Professor Chen was marking his calendar for the award ceremony. But here, in this half-finished music room in a brownstone, they were slowly turning into a home. Elena Morales stood in James Whitmore's arms and felt completely, radiantly visible. Not because the world was watching, but because she'd finally learned to see herself, and that was the real happy ending.